primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
My wife, Dr. Amy Ostick, who is the owner of Health and Healing DPC, and I feel that direct primary care is the future of medicine. I have seen burnout in the medical profession, and putting the patient-doctor relationship back at the forefront does a lot to heal that burnout. We went into medicine as doctors to help people, not fight with insurance companies and become documentation robots trying to maximize revenue. I feel that if more doctors could see the benefits of DPC, then more would go into primary care. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Let's get the word out there how great DPC can be. I'm Dr. Brian Ostick of Health and Healing Direct Primary Care, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Brian Ostick is a board-certified emergency medicine physician. He practices in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles. He is the ER medical director of Valley Presbyterian ER in Van Nuys, California, and just finished a 2-year term as the chief of staff at that hospital. He recently joined Health and Healing Direct Primary Care, owned and run by his wife, Dr. Amy Ostick. He is taking a small panel of patients to diversify his practice while still doing a full slate of ER shifts and keeping his ER administrative duties. He plays competitive basketball weekly in a men's league and took up golf during the pandemic, currently a 16 handicap, to keep himself in shape. Dr. Brian Ostick and his wife, Dr. Amy Ostick, live in Los Angeles with their 3 children, Sienna, 12, Madeline, 10, and Luke, 8. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Ostick.
Hey, thanks for having me, Marielle. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. This is such a treat because for the listeners who might not know, Dr. Brian and Dr. Amy have been very instrumental in trying to pull all the California DPCs together. They facilitate our meetings on a regular basis, and we just started that up again. And you guys doing that, it really embodies your excitement about DPC as a couple now functioning at Health and Healing DPC. So I wanted to get started with the fact that you are an ER trained physician.
I am.
Yeah. And so it's so interesting that we are seeing people like yourself who are not necessarily internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, choosing to do DPC. So can you share a little bit about what your life looked like before you joined on at Health and Healing?
Yeah, sure. So, my wife, Dr. Amy Ostick, and I met in medical school at Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia and fell in love and ended up graduating, getting married, and then starting residency. And she did her residency in family medicine, and I did mine in ER. And we've just been a family doc and an ER doc since then, since we started our first jobs in 2011. So it's been 10 years, 11 years now of me just doing emergency medicine. I love it. And I'm the ER medical director at my site, and I still do a full slate of ER shifts, about 14 shifts per month. But my wife started this practice 3 years ago in September of 2019, and it's been really a great success. And I've seen how happy she's been in her practice and how good it's been for her and how amazing the DPC community has been and just that model itself. And so doing emergency medicine can be difficult. There's a lot of, it's shift work, you don't schedule emergencies. So people show up, and there's a lot of stuff that we do in the emergency department to help people with emergencies and to help people do a lot of primary care as well, because unfortunately there's not a lot of access to healthcare. So when Amy and I were talking recently, probably about a year ago, we said, well, what if we could make some sort of transition, not a full jump from ER to DPC, right away, but could I come and in some aspect start working in the practice? And we did. We were able to carve out Mondays where I'm in the practice, and I'm going to take a small panel of patients, probably about 50. And it's been pretty amazing, actually. I've been very happy with it. I started doing it in September of 2022, so just a few months ago, and I've loved it.
That's incredible. And I will say that you have such a unique perspective, not only because you are an ER trained physician watching
Amy do her thing and make health and healing successful. But also you were wearing quite a few hats with regards to supporting her practice before you joined. So
Yeah.
in those first 3 years, as you were watching health and healing grow, what types of roles did you play? And what did you see from your vantage point as an ER physician, and how DPC looked like to you from, a financial survivability perspective, as well as being able to help offload those non-emergencies from your emergency room?
Right. So, I mean, to take the first question, I think when Amy started to practice in September of 2019, it was right before the pandemic, and I have no ownership in the model. I'll tell you that right now. Amy is 100%, female owned, and that's the way it will be, and she'll be the sole owner, I think, forever. So I had no financial. I mean, we're married, obviously, but I joke a little bit, but I didn't get paid anything from her until I just started working in the practice as a doctor. But I called, I was the CMO, I was the chief marketing officer. I did all of our social media stuff. I was the CFO. I say the chief furniture officer because I was building furniture and making sure that her, everything was set up. And I didn't get paid for any of it. But it was a lot of sweat equity, and a lot of doing what needed to be done just to open the practice and then to get things started. And like I said, it started in September of 2019. So to take your second question, the pandemic hit not soon after that. And it was kind of interesting to open the practice at that point and say, oh my gosh, like now we have this pandemic hitting, like, is this practice going to work out? Because what, are people going to even go to the doctor anymore? And are they be too scared? And what we saw is that Amy stayed open during the pandemic. Her practice did. And so she was open and figured out how to do COVID testing for people. So all of a sudden we became a COVID testing site just by default because she was one of the only doctor's offices that was open. In my practice, in the ER, we were seeing a lot of doctor's offices that were closed, and patients were coming to us saying, listen, I think I have COVID. I just can't get in to see my doctor because they're closed. And I'll tell you, today, there are still doctors in the community that are not seeing patients with cough and fever because they think it could be COVID. And we're 3 years past the start of the pandemic. I mean, you got to figure it out at this point. And Amy's been open from day one, never closed for COVID, has stayed open and continues to stay open and continues to test for COVID and uses appropriate PPE and all that sort of thing. And actually has seen, I think, growth during COVID because she was open. And the patient said, wow, you're open, you're available, you're testing, I can come to you. Well, yeah, I'm going to sign up for your practice.
Definitely. That comment is echoed in multiple practices in the direct primary care model because of having the ability to be accessible to your community the way your community needs you to be accessed. And so the fact that you guys and Amy at the time was able to practice the way that your community needed to in Woodland Hills and be a point of access, I think that's awesome. And it is a testament to how she determined what needed to happen, not, the admins say that we have to close the clinic this day until further notice because she doesn't have any admins looking over her. So thinking about, you said about a year ago, you were talking about, could you come on? What was it that really made it a reality for you to say, okay, I'm going to go from chief furniture officer and chief marketing officer to actually making the transition happen where you could wear the hat of an ER physician as well as a H&H physician?
Sure. So, in the emergency department, like I said, it can be tough work, and there is a lot of burnout. You don't see a lot of old ER doctors, unfortunately, because I think it's a tough business, right? Shift work, weekends, holidays, we're open 24/7, 365 days a year. And that can get difficult for people, especially as you get older, right? Doing night shifts is hard when you're young and just fresh out of residency, but doing night shifts when you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s becomes very difficult, like that the circadian rhythms being thrown off and all that sort of thing. So I'm looking to the future and saying, how do I just say the same way we would diversify a financial portfolio, we were saying, how would you diversify a medical career? And so am I just going to do this ER thing for the next 30 years until I burn out, or hopefully I don't burn out before then? Or is there some way that I can join your practice at Health and Healing Direct Primary Care and diversify my practice a little bit, which is very different from what I do in the ER. So, in the ER, I do my best work when people are unconscious and don't know that I'm even there, right? They don't remember their ER visit at all because they're in extremis or sick or whatever. And in other situations where we're doing urgent care, primary care type stuff, my job is to really see them, do a medical screening exam, make sure they don't have something emergent, and then get them out of the ER so that I can have room for the next patient that may truly be emergent. So I don't get a lot of time to spend with those sorts of patients who are the urgent care, primary care type patient that's in the emergency department. Well, then you take the doctor out of that ER setting and put them in the direct primary care setting. And now you have an hour to spend with a patient. And it's actually pretty fulfilling to say, gosh, I could sit with you for an hour and talk to you about all these different things. And I'll tell you one, one of my patients that I have now that's new to me has a, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, hasn't seen a doctor in forever, but he's in his, late 40s, has a family, and is like, gosh, I know I haven't taken care of myself the last decade. I need to start taking care of myself. And we have him now with, blood pressure controlled, his cholesterol is improving, and those sorts of things. And to be able to sit with him and go through that and say, man, you're having these thoughts of, I want to make sure that I'm healthy for my family and my wife and my kids. And now we can do that was really fulfilling to me, and to be able to have those sorts of interactions in a direct primary care practice is awesome.
Very cool. And like I mentioned, there are other ER trained physicians out there. Dr. Mitch Lee's been on the podcast. Dr. Megan Gaylor's in Georgia. Dr. Jim Lim is in Florida. If you were to, speak to a room of ER residents or medical students or people who are dreaming of being an ER physician, who are also hearing about the direct primary care model, in addition to the idea of longevity in the ER, what else would you share with them now as a DPC plus ER doctor?
Yeah, so I think having some sort of other, like just doing ER shifts, just being a pit doc for the whole career, I don't think is sustainable. I think you need to have some sort of outlet in your career other than just the ER shifts. And that could be a number of different things, right? It could be administration, it could be sports medicine, it could be wound care stuff that some ER docs do with hyperbarics and that sort of thing. Or, now it could be direct primary care. Now, I'm an ER doctor and I did my ER residency and I'm board certified, but I don't pretend that I'm a family doctor or I'm an internal medicine doctor and that I know everything that you did, because you guys did 3 or 4 year residencies for your internal medicine, family medicine residencies. And so there's a lot that I have to learn. And one of the things that I was nervous about with joining Amy's practice was, gosh, I really know emergency medicine. I've been doing it for over a decade, but I do not know primary care as well as I want to know it. I know urgent care pretty good because we do a lot of it at Valley Press, my ER, but what's an ASCVD score? How do I know who needs a statin? Like, that's not decisions that I am doing in the ER. I've never calculated an ASCVD score before 2 months ago. So it's really helpful to have a wife who's a very good family medicine doctor that I can curbside consult a lot, but I'm doing a lot of learning on my own as well.
In addition to Amy, having her there, have you found any other resources that were helpful to you that could be helpful to others who might be feeling that same, uneasiness going into primary care from an ER perspective?
Yeah. So, there's UpToDate we use a lot. I mean, I have access to it. So I'm using UpToDate an awful lot. I use a lot of MD Calc to make sure that I'm trying to be evidence-based as best as possible when making and so forth. EM Wrap is a ER podcast that I've listened to since I was a resident and is fantastic and really well done. And there is a primary care wrap that they've also done in conjunction with that. So there's some great stuff there that you can use to learn. I mean, the information's out there. You just got to go looking for it.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was just how you highlighted, making sure that a person is thinking about diversification is important from your recommendations. And
Sure.
You and Amy have diversified in terms of you are physicians in different training roles. You've created this, you've created a situation where you're now able to help out at Health and Healing. But in terms of looking at life from a financial perspective, you highlighted during the pandemic that was a little bit scary at first to say, like, what's actually going to happen financially with this clinic just having opened, and now we have the pandemic amongst us. Sure. Financially, how did you guys plan to open Health and Healing, and how did you continue to strategically plan financially going into the future, given that you guys have achieved financial freedom during your journey to open DPC?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the financial piece of medicine, we love talking about, and I think we should be more open and honest and talk about financial, both personal finances and business finances. I think we would all be better off if we would share ideas. So for our story, we did come out of medical school with $550,000 of student loan debt combined. And Amy and I got on the Dave Ramsey, let's pay it off as fast as possible plan. Dave Ramsey's baby steps is kind of what we followed. And we paid all of our debt, except our mortgage, off by December of 2017. And we had graduated in 2011. So 6 years. I had a few kids along the way. We have 3 now. And we were debt-free by then. So that was what really gave us the freedom to say, okay, maybe we can start this direct primary care practice, because now we no longer have our student loan debt that we have to make $4,000 a month minimum payments. That's gone. It's zero now. And I'm still doing my ER thing. So how about we just live off your ER income and save up money to start this practice? So we saved up about $30,000, $40,000, something like that, to do some renovations for our office, to get things started, to buy the initial things that you need to start a DPC practice. And then opened in September 2019. And we opened with, I would say, probably 20 to 40 patients, something like that. Not a lot, but something. And we built that up to, I think as of today, we have 561 patients combined. Amy has most of those. And it's been a very financially successful model for us. We did go to the nuts and bolts, DPC nuts and bolts, a few years ago before we started the practice. And Amy and I sat down and we had a business meeting it was in Disney at the time in Orlando. And we went to Disney Springs and we said, with our laptop, sat down and said, all right, let's put out this business plan. And on the back of the napkin, I was like, gosh, if you had, just throw out there $65 for an average patient per month cost, right? Or charge. And you had, 200 patients, we could probably meet our minimums of what we would need to kind of keep the lights on. If you had 400 patients, you could probably, get close to what you were making when you were working with Kaiser and UCLA and those sorts of things, but you had 2,000 to 3,000 patients on a panel. And if you had 600 plus patients, like you'd probably be making more money than you ever did with those companies, which is crazy. And when we looked at that, I was like, do we do that wrong? Like, are those numbers actually accurate? And we double checked it. I mean, and it was, hey, this is the kind of revenue that you would see with a 600 panel patient or 600 patient panel at $65 average patient charge. And you don't have a ton of overhead. That was kind of the beauty. And that was, I think, the light bulb for us to say, yeah, I think we can do this. And we had the benefit of me still being able to work in my job and being able to make our personal financial budget with just my income. And then as she's built her business, we've gotten back to that point where we were before she had started her practice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I definitely would say, I appreciate you sharing that, because some people still who are new to direct primary care as a business model, that transparency of we're transparent with pricing for our patients, but we're also transparent in terms of this amount of patients equals this amount of money. And
Right.
that is how you can calculate your overhead and project your P&Ls and whatnot. So let me ask you this. Very commonly, I hear residents say, oh, but I have that debt, the $550,000 in debt, and, might be single, no kids, really intimidated and really fearful of opening DPC because of the financial portion.
Mm-hmm.
You shared that you guys followed Dave Ramsey's baby steps. What other pieces of advice would you give to those people in particular, so that DPC could be reframed, or the jump to DPC financially could be reframed for those fears that they might have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the disclaimer would be that everybody's situation is individual, and personal finance is personal because everybody's life is different and everybody has different, there's different needs and there's different wants and those sorts of things. So, but what would I say to like the new resident starting off, graduating from a financial or from a family medicine residency who is looking to start a DPC? I would say that probably number one, it can be done. And there are ways to do it. Like, it's not like you have to go all into this or all into that. You could sometimes do a hybrid type model of, listen, I'm going to start this practice. I'm going to work for this urgent care, and then I'm also going to do this DPC thing. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to look for some sort of, if there was some sort of payback model that I could do to pay off the loans, and I could get the loans paid off. That would be one thing. Or, maybe you say like, gosh, we made this decision to take out student loans in the past, and I have to clean up my mess, and then I'll be able to start my direct primary care practice after that. So I take the job with Kaiser or UCLA or whoever it is, and I work for a number of years, and and I really try to crush it and knock out these student loans as fast as possible and live like a resident, live like a medical student. Don't buy a big house. Don't buy a fancy, expensive car. Like, especially if you're young and single, when you're making money as a doctor post residency, it's a good amount of money that if you can manage it right, you could throw pretty hefty debt payments at student loans. So maybe it's a plan. Maybe that's your 5-year plan. You say, I'm gonna sign up with this company, and I know it's not my long-term goal. My long-term goal is to have a DPC practice. I'm going to build this DPC practice in the background, but this is the bridge that I'm going to use to get to that point where I can say, I'm not going to work in that fee-for-service model anymore. I'm making the jump over to my DPC practice full time. But everybody's different, right? Like if you came out of family medicine residency and by some reason you had no debt, like your parents were able to fund it, or you did the military service or whatever it was that you were debt free, maybe you are able to start the practice right out of residency and say, I don't really have any financial burdens or obligations that I need to make sure that I'm paying. I can just kind of get out and start making some money and start small and build it up, and you can build quickly.
And one more question about finances in regards to big purchases. Dr. Matthew Mintz had shared about buying a very expensive piece of equipment to add value to his value proposition of his DPC. In terms of if you were to look at, a big purchase for health and healing, like, a vaccine fridge and freezer or something big like an ultrasound machine,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any advice on how to project your finances when you might be building your panel? You don't necessarily know how many patients are going to come in, but you would like to buy a big piece of equipment to incorporate as part of your value proposition for your clinic?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's going to be different thoughts here. I'm going to give it to you from what we would do and what we did do, because we were that Dave Ramsey get out of debt, baby steps followers. We don't borrow money, right? So we were not going to borrow $100,000 to buy a machine or whatever it is, or a fridge. We were not going to go into debt to do that. So that was just a non-starter for us. If you were going to borrow money to buy whatever, whether it's in your own business or in your own personal life, like you better have a way that you can pay it back, because if you can't pay it back, like that becomes a real big issue. And so for us, we try to live our life debt free. Like we are still, we don't use credit cards. We still don't have any student loans. They're gone. We don't have car loans. We own our cars. There's no debt on the business at all. And that feels very freeing and clean to us. And so I couldn't say that we would ever go out there and borrow, but listen, I understand that people are going to, and they do just have a plan for it.
Great advice. And I think that people can take those words and adapt it to their own situation, which is super helpful.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you were the chief marketing officer before you joined on. So when you were
unpaid,
in this, unpaid, when you were in this volunteer position and you were helping the practice get visibility in the community, and also grow and make people aware of the value proposition, what did you find was most helpful, and what strategies did you try and find were not as helpful?
Yeah, great question. And, I think we always had a Facebook presence. We then started pretty quickly with an Instagram presence. We don't really use Twitter or TikTok at this point, although we probably should. And so it was very much posting and sharing and doing those sorts of things, but also making sure that you're getting when people Google the name Health and Healing Direct Primary Care, or people Google Dr. Amy Ostic, like make sure that those things that are showing up on your Google search are accurate. So what I would see in the beginning when we first started off is I would Google Dr. Amy Ostic, and it was showing up as her Kaiser phone number and Kaiser address and those sorts of things. And I'm like, she hasn't been at Kaiser for 2 years, 3 years. Like, why is that still showing up? I need Health and Healing Direct Primary Care to be the phone number, and I need Health and Healing Direct Primary Care to be the address, so that when people see that, they're not confused. And so I was very diligent with, especially in the beginning, of saying, I own this page, right? Like, this is me. We're going and putting in requests to change the information. And it was frustrating because there's a lot of different sites out there that have a lot of wrong information, especially if you've been at a couple of different practices in the past. And so it was a matter of like every couple of days, like going on and Googling again, Health and Healing Direct Primary Care, and seeing what was there and what was accurate and what wasn't, and then just trying to go and make those changes. We used Google, like making sure that our Google Maps was updated and that was ours and that we can manage that. We used Yelp. We have a Yelp, make sure you go to the Yelp page, not to pay for Yelp, because we did do that and I don't recommend it. I didn't like paying for Yelp. I thought it was not helpful and I thought they were pretty pushy. But making sure that you have said, this is my Yelp business page, so that you can monitor it, look at it, respond to people who email you through it, as well as post pictures. And that's another thing, is I think visibility with pictures is pretty underrated. I see a lot of practices that don't have any pictures of the doc there. Like when people sign up for your DPC practice, they want to see the doctor. They're coming to see you, the doctor. So make sure your pictures are showing you, the doctor. And they should also show, what the place looks like, what the exam rooms look like, what the lobby looks like, if you have a lobby, what the waiting room is, whatever it is, and people that work there, right? So Anna Maria and Paula are our two MAs that work with us, and they're prominently displayed on all of our social media, right? People know Anna Maria and Paula, and they love Anna Maria and Paula. So when they see them, they respond to that. So make sure you post your people, make sure you post your place, make sure you have more pictures than all the other doctors' offices out there.
And early on during the pandemic, you guys started really, really awesome videos in terms of just sending updates, whether it was about COVID or about, just general primary care type things. What was your guys' time investment in terms of preparing for those videos and posting those videos? And did you find that having a video presence out there was effective for your community?
Yeah, the time investment was not much. I mean, we would say, okay, on Friday morning, I'll come over because I'm not working and we'll just do a video from your office. And so we would kind of just wax poetic on the phone with a little ring light, and we'd have some sort of rough outline that we would put together right before we went on, but there wasn't a lot of time that was invested in there. And I think people liked it. I mean, I hear from people still saying, oh, you guys stopped doing those weekly videos. I was watching all of them. And it's funny because you see how many views you get. And it wasn't like it was getting a ton of views, but I think we had some people that really liked seeing it. And maybe it was a bit of a calming presence during a scary time. And I hope it was. And I hope we did get some good information out there, because there was a lot of misinformation out there for sure.
Definitely. And I think just going back to the, showing who's there at the office, that was a very, very, detailed version, so to speak, like arguably to show who the doctors were now. And the doctor was at the time, just Amy at the time, in terms of who you would be seeing. And does this person talk like they're treating you like a normal person rather than speaking in just medicalese or whatnot. And it can show your guys' value proposition just through how you're sharing information, which I thought was awesome. And you guys did a great job with those videos.
You can do so much free marketing. You don't need to spend a lot of money on a marketing budget, if any. And I don't think you need to pay for a big marketing company to come in and do all that for you. I think you can do a lot of it, via grassroots. And in the end, I'll be honest with you, I think the best marketing is not social media marketing at all. I think it's word of mouth. I think it's a family of 5 that signs up with you and has the best experience they've ever had with a doctor. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can come in on the same day I call you, and I can have you see my kid who I think is sick, and have you tell me that the kid's going to be okay, or the kid's going to get antibiotics. And that's amazing. And then they go back and tell their friends, like, I just had the most ridiculous, amazing experience with this doctor's office. You need to sign up. And that's the best marketing you could ever have.
I definitely agree with that. So I encourage people to, no matter where they are, especially if they're in their starting out days, to, continue to treat your patients as you wanted to treat them when you opened your DPC, because the word will spread. So I absolutely agree with you on that. Yeah. Now, going back to your guys' business plan on that napkin, sitting at Disney Springs, when you joined, who joined your practice, and do you have a financial strategy, but also a patient onboarding strategy in terms of how many patients you want to reach, or are you just feeling that out based on how it is balancing the ER plus health and healing?
Yeah, so we didn't go into it saying like this is going to be your niche, although we did think that the male audience that was around my age would probably be more interested to see me. That was kind of our hypothesis of like, hey, maybe we'll get more men to show up and you'll do more, men's health type things. And lo and behold, it actually kind of worked out the way we thought it would, right? So most of my panel right now are the dads of the families who had never signed up before. And so we would have a mom and 3 kids, but the dad wasn't a member. And then I joined, and all of a sudden, okay, dad is going to sign up now because he wants to see you as opposed to Amy. And that's just like, some people feel more comfortable seeing, somebody, a guy wants to have a doctor who's a guy, or a female wants to have a doctor who's a female, or vice versa, whatever. And whatever you like is fine. But for us in this practice, that seemed to be, who was gravitating towards seeing me. And that's been kind of cool. And so I think we're kind of pushing that, is to say, hey, if you want, you could sign up the whole family. Dr. Amy will see the mom and the kids, and Dr. Brian can see the dad. And that works out for us because Amy's got a bigger panel than I do, obviously. So I think people like that.
And then with you joining the practice, how did you start accepting and then onboarding patients? Was it modeled after how Amy was accepting and onboarding patients, or did you have your own separate workflows because of your brain working differently than your wife's when you came on and started taking patients?
Yeah. So, the girls are pretty good, I think, when people are calling in now to sign up patients, to say like, oh, are you calling? Would you rather see Dr. Amy? Would you rather see Dr. Brian? And then kind of funneling them that way, and then getting them on our schedules. And so when I see a patient for the first time, I'm going through a full history and physical. Obviously, we have that hour long, that we need, but I am trying to follow along some sort of initial history and physical exam so that I can get all the information at first. And for me, it's helpful because we use Atlas MD. So, we have the initial, it's a little dot phrase, if you would call it, or a hashtag, whatever it is. And it kind of pulls up the history and physical exam, and I can kind of follow through that in more of an algorithmic process. I think that helps with my ER brain, because we do a lot of ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. And this is kind of like, let's follow along, and I can get through this, and we'll get all the health information we need, and then we'll kind of go from there.
And then because you guys are practicing as a husband and wife co-physician team with 3 kids, how are you guys, people will say balance, people will say different words for the ability to live your life as mom and dad, as husband and wife, as doctors, as all the hats. So how are you guys managing your time when it comes to doing all the things?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So on a day-to-day basis, if I'm in the office on Mondays, that's kind of Amy's day during the week to not be in the office. Now, she does take, phone call or text if she needs to during the day, but that's kind of like her mental health day, if you will, where the kids are at school and she can do what she needs to do without anybody else around. And then she's in the office Tuesday through Friday doing her regular clinic. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, it's kind of, if we don't go into the office on Saturdays and Sundays, but we're available by text or phone if needed. When you talk about, vacation, like I'm going back with the whole family to Philadelphia next week because my sister's getting married. So that's going to be awesome. Right. But we do have a doctor that has helped us to cover while we were gone. So that's been really, really nice. She's an amazing family medicine doctor. We're actually trying to get her to join the practice. We'll see if that ends up happening, but she's been really willing to help out when we've needed it. And to cover. When it comes down to it, though, I think a lot of our patients are pretty understanding, and a lot of patients are still able to get in touch, with the doctor if needed. But it doesn't, having a direct primary care practice has not kept us from going on vacation. I'll say that.
So reassuring for, I'm sure, many of the listeners to hear, because it's a common thing that comes up in terms of another fear, financial fears being one, but another set of fears is, how am I going to be able to not burn out when I'm the solo doctor, or in your case, like a husband and wife might be both doctors and both practicing in the practice, and there's no coverage potentially. So I think it's great to hear your experience and to have people, from your experience, be able to brainstorm and envision their own lives taking things like vacation, because it's super necessary for us to be able to take care of ourselves, to take care of other people. So I love that.
I would put a plug in for you guys, though. I mean, all the work that you've done with Amy and with James about getting that, the DPC California Syndicate and the website up and running. And I know you guys are trying to do a kind of a, hey, can we cross cover for each other when people need it? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing is available. And with the way the DPC community is, how helpful I think DPC docs are with helping other DPC docs, it really is pretty refreshing, because you don't see that in a lot of different specialties.
Definitely. And just a little backstory there in terms of the meetings that Dr. Amy and Dr. Brian have helped set up for all of the California Cs. Dr. Frankie Fiedler in the Bay Area had mentioned this idea of, hey, could we help cover each other so we could have coverage when somebody wants to go to, I think Jordan was one place somebody's going. And for us, it was Legoland. Like I needed coverage the other month, but yeah, brainstorming amongst each other within your area, your state, because you're licensed in your state, you don't necessarily have to physically be in the same location as another DPC doctor to be able to cover patients. I'm glad you brought that up because it is definitely a way that we've helped just identify who's willing to cover. Is it coverage for trade of other coverage? Is it coverage for a certain price per day? But having more opportunities, I think I agree, easier in the DPC space because DPC physicians are very supportive of helping each other be not only successful, but also to maintain our sanity and our autonomy. So I think that it's a really great place to start if you are in a micro practice and you might not have a local doctor to be able to cover. And then in terms of what you mentioned with regards to Dr. James Gore and Amy and myself, the website, and people can go to it easily enough. It's calidpc.com, calidpc.com. And what we've tried to do is just like people have done in Houston area and other places, but we've tried to create a central page. So if there's a resident in California or a resident who's looking to move to California, that we have a networking place for if somebody wants to find. And recently it was a broker needing to find somebody to work with in California. The website was very helpful as a centralized place to find DPC practices, no matter where in the state you were looking for. So definitely that's another resource to check out, calidpc.com, especially if your state might not have something like that and you're looking for a model to create one. That's just what we created. But yeah, now looking back, is there anything that you guys would have done differently or changed, whether that be financially or whether that be, onboarding patients as quickly as you did, or any services you may have offered or not offered, anything you would have done differently and why?
Yeah, I think we just went to, again, the DPC nuts and bolts that was in Dallas just a couple of weeks ago. And it was a great conference to see everybody and see some of the DPC docs around the country. And a lot of the talk there was bringing on employers. And I think that was something that we didn't push when we first opened. I mean, and I think for us, it was because a lot of our patients were coming from our school and our church and our local community. And that was what we were really focusing on. But I do see the value, I think, in bringing on small businesses, especially, and combining that with the DPC practice. So there's a lot of talk, Neer Patel with Virtuous Benefits was there. And we were talking about, gosh, do you have this small business that's 10, 20, 50 employees, and they're spending a ton of money on health insurance because they use one of the BUCA plans, Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Anthem, or Humana. And they're spending all this money and they don't need to. If they could get with one of these, if they could get with Neer or another company that would do similar things where you could cut your insurance costs in half, combine that with a DPC practice that would give those employees better care than they've ever had before, and save yourself the bottom line for that business, it's like a win-win. So I'm really kind of excited about pushing that now and saying, like, are the next 50 patients that sign up with Health and Healing Direct Primary Care coming from a small business as opposed to coming from our community? And how does that work? So, if you're starting off, consider that. Think about reaching out to small businesses in your neighborhood and say, gosh, we might be able to save you money and sign you up for our practice and get you better care than you've ever had before.
Definitely. And I would say for a very, very entry level, but awesome primer on even the different types of plans, the BUCA plans versus a self-funded plan, I'll highlight Dr. Katrini Iqbal and Neer Patel's My DPC Story podcast episode in the blog accompanying your podcast so that people can take a listen to. But it's a great explanation that he shares so people can understand, like, when we talk about employers with 50 or fewer employees, it might be small compared to, like a Google employer, but at the same time, 50 people generating a ton of debt for a company because of unnecessary costs that can come out of primary care costs being inflated by an insurance plan really makes an impact. And especially during the pandemic, we saw a lot of businesses, look for different ways that were able to still give their employees excellent health care without putting them into bankruptcy. So I definitely would say, check that episode out and I do agree. I encourage people to think about or envision could I work with employers and how could that work for me? Because I will say, like I've said on the podcast before, I remember sitting and listening to Dr. Shane Purcell talk about it at the 2019 HINT Summit. And I was like, oh, heck no, I will never work with employers, because if 50 people join and then 50 people leave, I'm down 50 people. But there's definitely other ways to look at it. So I would say, if you are in a place where you're a micro practitioner and you are or you are not near other DPCs who may or may not be taking employers, start talking to people about like, hey, what could that look like? Because you might not have the perspective that somebody else does, and you might learn something from them and think about things differently. So I just, I say that with a summary of just keep an open mind. So I thank you so much for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
in terms of going back to your intro statement, this idea of if more physicians or physicians in training knew about direct primary care as a model, that more people would go into primary care. Speaking from an ER physician trained background, I wonder, what was it that made you choose emergency medicine? And what would you say from those shoes you would have chosen primary care had you seen something different in your training? And what would you envision being a big impactor for people to get exposure to DPC as a model going into the future to possibly increase the amount of primary care physicians in the nation?
Well, yeah, I mean, first I'd like to say that I'm glad you're doing this podcast because it's getting the word out there, right? And Amy and I didn't know about direct primary care until just a few years ago when we heard about it. So it's new. I mean, it's fairly new, right? I think Dr. Josh Umber has probably been doing DPC for 10 years, 11 years, something like that. And he's like one of the oldest guys doing it, not old in age, but oldest DPC practice that has probably been around. So it's very new. And what's interesting is that emergency medicine is one of the newer specialties. If you talk about, internal medicine started hundreds of years ago, and surgery has been around obviously for a long time. Like ER medicine really only came around as a specialty in the 1970s and got popularized by some of the TV shows like, ambulance and ER and those sorts of things. And so we're fairly new as that. Why did I go into ER? Because I love the excitement. I love that you have something different every day. You never know what's coming in. Those same things that I love about it are also the same things that may burn you out, because you never know what's coming in, and there are stresses and challenges that go along with that. So I still love it. I still am going to do emergency medicine. I tell people I'm not switching over to Amy's practice 100%. I'm not quitting my job. I think I'll be in the ER for a very long time, but I have found this direct primary care. Would you call it a movement? Would you call it a new specialty? Would you call it a practice model? However you define it, Amy and I think it's the future, that if more people did this, that the care of people in America would be better, people's health would be better, and the mental health of the doctors themselves would be better. Because I think the traditional insurance model of primary care burns people out. Seeing 25, 30, 40 patients a day in a traditional fee-for-service based model it's crushing. It is soul crushing. And so having the freedom to have your own business, to be able to spend time with patients again, to be able to spend an hour with a patient if you need to, is a breath of fresh air. And I think more people should learn about direct primary care and experience it, and hopefully start their own.
I love it. And, just hearing that, it just makes me think about how it is restoring the health and healing to both patients and physicians. So awesome that you guys encompass that in the name of your practice. And thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Ostick, and for sharing wise words of wisdom.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. You do a great job. Keep it up.
Next week, look forward to hearing from Dr. Nicole Harkin of Whole Heart Cardiology in San Francisco, California. If you've enjoyed the podcast and you haven't yet done so, subscribe today and share the episode with a physician you may know who needs to hear about DPC. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify now, as well, as it helps others to find all these DPC stories. Lastly, be sure to follow us on social media. If you're wanting to continue learning more about DPC in the meantime, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Concepcion.